So I've been waiting for a cool day to really try this out. Today we're going to be reviewing the Wagonmeister Volvo 240 heater valve replacement kit. And on these old 240s, the original heater valves after 30 years or so tend to fail in one of two ways. One, they just stop ever turning off. So you can't turn off the heat. You got hot air coming out of the vents at all times. Obviously that could be a problem, especially in the summer. Your air conditioner won't work. So, you know, kind of a big problem. The other way they fail, which is the way mine actually failed, have a little bit of extra rattling going on today. The other way they failed is your heat would basically be bipolar. You'd have really cold air or really hot air and no in between. And that's what mine was doing before I replaced the valve. So in the winter or the fall, if I wanted to drive the car, as soon as I moved the slider off of cold, I would get really hot heat. And so what you would get was sort of like on these fall days when it wasn't that cold out, but you wanted a little bit of heat, you could never get the car to be comfortable. And so that's why I replaced the valve. Now, I bought the Wagonmeister kit. They are a small independent shop that does Volvo 240 restorations and sells a few custom parts. And to replace the original brass valve, the one that failed. I bought the kit because I remember seeing it on their website a long time ago, and speed bump. I remember seeing it on their website a long time ago, and it was just in my mind. So when I decided I wanted to do the job, I went and I bought the kit. It was about $160. And as I did a little bit more research, there are other options out there too that you might want to look into. The Wagonmeister kit is basically one of the most expensive ways you could do this. You can buy an original brass replacement valve from IPD for cheaper than the Wagonmeister kit. It's like $140 versus $160. And you could buy just sort of generic heater valves that you could plumb into the car, and it should basically do the same thing. The Wagonmeister kit is some custom bent rubber pipes. It is some it's a custom bracket that the valve sits on, and that's really about it. A swivel nut to attach the valve to the cable that opens and closes it, and that's about it. So I'm going to take this car for a drive. I'm going to get it warmed up. It's pretty cool out. Right now I'm blowing cold air. I have the heat turned off. Car's not warmed up yet. I'm going to stop, get gas, warm up the car, shut up whatever's rattling back there, and then we'll test it and see if we can get warm air and not just hot air out of the vents. All right, maybe one day I'll learn how to permanently shut up that tailgate back there, and I'll make a video of it. But at least we fixed the rattling. The car is starting to warm up a little bit here. Let's see what we could do. We're going to turn on the heat. So I've had the fan running, still blowing cold air. I'm just going to slide the valve over a little bit and see if we start to get some warm air. So far, the air is still pretty cool. Cold coming out. I slid the slider over about a ½ inch. So we're going to drive. The engine's not fully warmed up yet. We're going to drive a little bit more, or warm up this engine some more, and let's see if we can get an answer before we open up the valve. So remember, my goal here is warm air. Warm air coming out of the valves, warmer than the air outside, but not boiling hot air. Okay, so I've been driving now, almost all the way back actually from the gas station, and we are getting warm air from the vents. It's not boiling hot. I should have brought my infrared thermometer, but I gotta drive. And this is basically what I was hoping for with the fix. I'm getting warm air out of the vents now. It's not gonna cook me out, although the engine's not fully heated up yet, so I should drive a little more and see how it's going. So the kit works. In terms of the review, it was hard to install. You're working in an uncomfortable place underneath. We've got a lot of people coming up here. working in an uncomfortable place with not much room, with old heater, like rubber heater hoses that were stuck to the valve, prying those off, putting the new ones on, and just a lot of little hose clamps. If I were to do it again, I might try just replacing the valve with the one from IPD, the original. That would be a lot easier to install. Just unhook 2 hoses, rehook 2 hoses, screw it in, and you're done. Or if I really wanted to update things, I would save a lot of money and just buy a generic kit that you could buy for $50 in a lot of places that is supposed to update. That will put a generic valve. It gives you the hoses you need, and you just have to, figure out how you want to secure the valve. That's $50 versus the Wagonmeister, which was $160. The Wagonmeister parts supposedly come with a lifetime warranty, so that might be worth it. It was expensive, and it was a pretty difficult install. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're a little more adventurous, I think you could probably homebrew this whole thing yourself. And if you want to just try it if you want to really replace it, let's say you have heat that's stuck on and you can't get it turned off, and you want to fix that, probably the easiest thing to do would be buy the reproduction brass valve from IPD for $140. But you could take a look at the video to see how the installation went. It's not complicated. It's just working in a difficult, tight situation with old hoses. If you're comfortable doing that, it's pretty easy, and it does work. All right, thanks for watching. Okay, step 1 of installing the new heater core valve is to drain all the coolant from the engine. The best, although maybe not the easiest way of doing this, is using the coolant drain plug, which is down here on the exhaust side of the engine. There it is. You can see the spigot right there. So just turn that and open up your expansion tank and drain out all the coolant. Remember, coolant is poisonous and toxic, so drain it into a container and dispose of it properly. Don't leave it around pets or children. So a 13mm socket with an extension lets you unscrew this pretty easily. And just a reminder that you really should be changing the coolant every 2 years on these old cars anyway. So if you haven't done that in a while, now's a good time to start. Now you might have to poke it to get it flowing, but then it'll come out. There could be a little bit of debris in there clogging it. Let it drain for a while. Remember, the more coolant you get out, the better this is going to be. The easier it's going to be, the cleaner it will be on the inside. Okay, the Wagonmeister instructions also say to blow out the heater core valve. So where the valves come through the firewall, so those are the 2 hoses that go into the firewall to the original heater core. So the instructions say take those 2 hoses off, put some hose on there, and then use compressed air to blow them out. I'm going to take them off. We'll see how this goes. Okay, I was having a hell of a time getting the bottom heater valve hose off. In fact, I never did get it off. I was afraid I was going to break something. So what I did was I just hooked my little clear piece of plastic tubing here and hooked it to the top heater valve hose, which I was able to get off easier. The block drain is still open, and what I've been doing is just blowing. I haven't been using compressed air for my air compressor. I've just been blowing into this plastic hose, and it's been blowing the coolant out of the heater valve into the block and then out the block drain. So this works. You don't have to take off both. Leave that block drain open and just hook up a little spare piece of hose to the top and gently blow some air in there. If you're going to use compressed air, turn down the pressure. I don't like the idea of putting high pressure air into a 30-year-old heater core. After you scrub your hands really good, you can move on to the inside of the car. So first thing we're gonna do is remove this knee bolster. This is a 91, so it has a knee bolster. Older cars might not have this, so you won't have to remove it. But there's 2 screws here, and my light's moving, but all the way on the other side. So we're just gonna pop off these panels. There's gonna be Torx screws under there. I've had this off a few times before. We'll take off those Torx screws, and then we'll drop the knee bolster. Let's get the knee bolster off. You might have a piece of felt back here. I don't. I lost that somewhere along the way. Maybe when I was doing the manual swap. But you do have to take off this plastic trim piece here. Torx screws, although I replaced one of mine with a little trim anchor there. But take off that piece of plastic, and then we should be able to find the heater valve that we're going to be working with. All right, up here is the valve we're going to be replacing. So we're going to take off the cable, the screw here for this little bracket, and there's a little socket and a little nut up here. So we're going to take both those off. Okay, when you're removing the wire, you have to turn this little screw up here on top, and this is pretty hard to get to. You don't turn the bigger nut, that's the swivel nut. You turn this little screw, so a pair of good needle nose pliers will get it, or I guess if you have a tiny screwdriver and you could reach up there. Once you have that wire, the wire removed, the next set of instructions say just to take this bracket and pull it. You see it slides in back there. So they say firmly yank it, and it should come undone and slide towards you. Okay. The Wagonmeister instructions say to pull this bracket loose. It slots into this plastic piece here, and they just say tug on it, but that's not coming off. Probably you have to get a screwdriver back behind there because it's clicked in or something. Anyway, the valve itself is just held on with 2 screws. So forget pulling that thing off. I don't think it's going to be in the way when we install a new one. The new one's going to get installed. Well, we'll see. If it's in the way, we'll have to deal with it. But let's get everything else out of the way first. So after you get this done, we have to take off these hoses and hope not too much coolant comes out. So get some towels and be gentle. You don't want to rip these hoses. They're 30 years old and they're kind of fragile. Here's the old valve, and this is really, really hard to get off. I had to crush this a little bit. So the hoses are more or less glued. In fact, I think they're literally glued onto these copper bits. You have to break that glue seal before they'll come out. I was able to get, the only way I was able to do it really was by getting vice grips on them and then wiggling it back and forth. And that broke the glue, and then once the glue is broken, then you could just take the hoses off. It's not too bad. But when they're glued on there, they are on there. You really don't have access to pry it off with a screwdriver. So anyway, here's the old valve. Kind of lots of copper, looks pretty complicated and high quality, but as you know, gives you 2 temperatures, really hot and not hot at all. And here's the new valve, sold by Wagonmeister, and with their custom bracket. And this doesn't look really all that complicated at all. It's just a little ball that allows you to control the flow in and out. So this is what's going in. All right. Okay, so here's the bracket that was holding the original valve in place. And this I couldn't get out by pulling it. So I unscrewed the valve. And eventually I pried it out. So it was held on by this clip here. And this clip was digging into the plastic that was housed in, and also on the other side, digging into the sheet metal. And it was pretty secure on there. So if you have this clip and it won't come loose by pulling it, mine wouldn't. I was bending it. It was not going to come loose. Just get a pick or a small screwdriver and bend this up, and that will let it slide out, because then the teeth will release and you could pull out this bracket. But that's the trick. It did not want to come out without me bending this little clip up. All right, so after you have the old valve out, take off the top bolt of this bracket. The bottom one probably has your ground wire on it. Take off the top one with a 10mm. And then move on to the next thing. All right, so I have put the copper or brass splice onto the hose that's running towards the passenger side of the car. And next step is to put this elbow on here. The long end goes onto the splice. And it's kind of helpful right now to understand the orientation of this thing. This valve is going to be sitting up there like that, with this pointed towards the front of the car. This is the outlet. You can see there's an arrow. There it is. You can see there's an arrow. So this elbow is curving, is going to bring that hose around so I can hook up to the outlet on this new valve. So I'm going to put that on, and then once you kind of understand the orientation of where all the hoses are going, it becomes a little bit easier to just know what to do. All right, here it is coming along. The inlet valve curls around, should meet up there to the hose coming out of the firewall. The elbow should go right there. Don't forget your hose clamps. I like to use a little bit of Vaseline or brake parts grease on these fittings. It makes it a lot easier to get them on. And just tighten it up with a little ratchet. All right, here I have all the hoses hooked up. Nothing clamped up, well, except for the one going towards the passenger side there. Now's a good time to push this bracket into place, which is roughly there. And make sure everything looks good, nothing's kinked, nothing's in the way. This needs full motion, so you see right here the way this is, it's hitting that. It's not tight yet, so I'll have to turn that. So now I'm going to go ahead and splice everything together permanently and hope for the best. All right, once you have that little bowl of spaghetti you just made and you think everything is secure, push the bracket into place like that and start it with the little nut. Not nut. They do give you a nut, but my captive nut is still there, so I don't have to worry about that. This little bolt and lock washer setup they provide with the kit. Start it by hand, and then we'll probably switch to a ratcheting box wrench. So the instructions say to make sure the bracket is pretty level, and the only good news is it does settle in level pretty naturally. So even though only one bolt is holding it, it settles into a naturally level position, so that's good. My bracket has a little sharp shard right there by the cable retainer, which cut me, so be careful with that. Probably should have been ground off, but now that's tight and that's level. So the next thing is to install the cable. This is closed and this is open, so this is going to swivel like this, closed, open. You want to make sure you get it all the way closed, but we'll go ahead and do that. And then the spaghetti, the coolant tubes up there, well, let's hope that holds. We'll see if it's leak free when we try it. So you might have to reroute this cable underneath this canister here, this vacuum canister. So it's a little bit hard, but I had to wrestle it around, down and back. And now we're just going to put this into the cable clamp and hook up the wire. So just keep in mind, this is the heat on with the arm pointing down, and this is the heat off. You want to make sure you can turn the heat all the way off. So when you hook up this cable and you have it all on the cold on the dash, make sure this is pointed all the way up. All right, pretty simple. Just make sure it closes all the way. Make sure that's, or else you'll never get cold air out. And I don't think you have to worry about too much. It doesn't open 100%. You know that you'll get plenty of hot air once that goes down. So I've checked, this is closed. It's not quite as far as it's gonna go. So there we go. Refill your cooling system. I only use genuine Volvo coolant. It's as cheap as anything you find at your local parts store. Make sure you mix it 50-50 with distilled water before you fill up your coolant. After you refill the coolant, run the car, turn on the heat, and make sure you burp the cooling system. So I've had this trouble before. One thing that helps is simply squeezing the upper and lower radiator hose. making sure no air is trapped in there, and watch the temperature gauge, make sure you're not overheating. And of course, check to make sure you're not leaking